Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for the fourth in our series of your Make Your Mark webinars. Today we will be focusing on the hidden carbon in our digital footprint. And as some of you may know, the Planet Mark, we're a sustainability certification and we focus on getting the best out of people, technology and nature. So focusing on that technology aspect today. We're lucky enough to be joined by some co-hosts today. So we've got Digital Detox's co-founder and managing director, Liam Snelling, managing director of Urgio, Ben Clifford, and one of our Planet Mark sustainability consultants, Ollie Longland. So I'm just going to let them say a little bit more about who they are and give a little bit of an introduction about what they do and what they'll be doing on the webinar today. So if I just hand over to you guys in that order. So if we start with Liam, say a bit of a hello and an introduction, then we'll go to Ben and then Ollie. Thanks, Liam.
Great, thanks, Kendal. Good morning, everybody. As Kendal mentioned, my name's Liam. I'm the co-founder and managing director at Digital Detox. So my day-to-day focus is looking after my team, supporting our clients to achieve their goals and running a hopefully successful business. I think first and foremost, though, I'm a dad. I've got two boys here in Bristol, and my number one goal in life really is to be on my best form for them. So that means focusing on my well-being, my team's well-being, and ensuring a positive work-life balance. Also creating a positive sense of purpose at work. We spend so much time at work, it's important that we enjoy what we do and we have some guidance and direction in what we do on a daily basis. So my interests lie in looking after people, working hard to help protect the planet wherever possible, and safeguarding the world around us for current and future generations. And in other hats, my other hats, I sit on the London South Bank University Advisory Board. I'm also a member of the BEMA Sustainability Board, active member of the Future Economy Network here in Bristol, and of course I very much enjoy being part of the Planet Mark. So Digital Detox, I guess I'm quite privileged, and I appreciate that privilege as I'm able to lead my company and take my interest in people and the planet into my company, and to hopefully be a force for good in creating more sustainable businesses. So Digital Detox, we're a humanity-led organisation. So that means we focus on solving problems and delivering solutions that will benefit people and the planet. We use our skills and experience in digital technology to make products that solve complexity and result in better productivity, and ultimately making people and our users happy. So we do work in digital. We are quite tech focused, but we certainly believe in a world where technology and humanity work together. And we use digital to remove unnecessary barriers of complexity from technology. And digital products are built to empower and delight. So today we'll be talking about Digital Detox as a company, what we're trying to do to manage our own impact and our carbon footprint, but also how we're supporting our clients to do something similar. Because as a company, we can look after our own impact, but we can have a bigger impact, if you like, with our clients and their carbon footprint. And that can go quite wide and further than just our own company operations. So that's me. I think there's a big change happening in 2020. I think we're in a significant time from a global context. And this year is a good opportunity for us all to make a change and hopefully move towards a more sustainable lifestyles and businesses. And I think I'm going to hand over to Ben now.
Yeah, cheers, Ben. Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Clifford. I'm the managing director at Urgio Studios. Like Liam, I'm a dad as well, so I've got a toddler in the background, and hopefully he's going to stay out of trouble and not make too much noise. Yeah, started the company a few years ago. I'm going to talk a bit more about what we do. Basically, we say we make planet-friendly websites. So we're going to talk more about what that actually means during my section. We're based in Hackney, a small team, kind of focus on small business, micro business, and we essentially do WordPress web design and development and maintenance. But the key thing is that we do green hosting and also what we call carbon emission optimization for websites. So in my section, I'm going to kind of take you through some nice, easy tools for how you can test your own website and find out how green it is at the moment and how you can fix it if you get a bad score. So hopefully, yeah, you'll come away from the session today with a bit more knowledge and a bit more kind of hands-on awareness of the tools that you can use to look at your own website and figure out how to improve it. So yeah, I'll go into that in more detail shortly. I'll hand over to you, Ollie.
Great, thanks, Ben. I'm a sustainability consultant here at Planet Mark, and I support our clients with their carbon footprinting and target setting challenges. Today, I'm going to be running through Digital Detox's carbon footprint, because it's important that all businesses measure their carbon footprint, even though many businesses, particularly in the digital space, find that they can have a greater impact, enabling carbon savings for their clients.
Thanks so much, everyone, for those introductions. Really exciting to hear more in a minute. Before we get into the interesting section of the webinar, just wanted to run over a few technical bits. So you'll have joined on mute with your videos off, that's fine. But just if you want to say hello, any introductions, any chat, if you can put that in the chat box, so you'll have an icon at the bottom of your screen, so any chat can go in there. Another icon you should have is the Q&A icon. So if you have any questions, please put those in the Q&A box. And then if you see anybody else asking questions that you are also interested to know the answer in, you can upvote on those questions. And it just means that when we get to the Q&A at the end of the session, the most popular questions will get bumped to the top of the list, and we'll focus on answering those first. So yeah, questions in the Q&A, and we'll have some time at the end to go through any of those. We're also going to do a bit of a screen share swap, so I'll be handing over to Liam at some point. So just to tee everyone up for that. So we've heard a little bit from our speakers about what they're going to talk about today, but just a bit of an introduction and agenda. We'll do some scene setting. Ollie will look at, as he mentioned, Digital Detox's carbon footprint, just to do some scene setting and give us some context around why it's so important to measure and understand the carbon associated with our businesses, before moving on to the hidden carbon in our digital footprint. So looking at what it is, where it comes from. Liam will talk through that in some more detail. And then we'll hear from both speakers on how we can reduce that hidden carbon as well, before having 10-15 minutes at the end for any of your questions. But just to put some context around our conversation, why are we talking about this? So the Decade of Action is a UN initiative. We have 10 years to accelerate solutions to combat the climate crisis by avoiding that global average temperature increase of 3 to 4 degrees. And cutting our carbon emissions is a hugely important part of that, including in our digital footprints. So Planet Mark holders will know about our commitment to this target. And as we enter the Decade of Action, so between 2020 and 2030, it kind of feels like we're already experiencing so much change, such huge changes in our lives. And for the vast majority of us, COVID has meant that many aspects of our lives have moved online. And this has been made possible through digital technologies. So various platforms and tech have allowed us to feel connected to loved ones, to work colleagues, to the world through things like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. But as with pretty much everything, it seems, there is a hidden cost, and that's the carbon footprint associated with those online interactions. So Liam and Ben are going to talk more about that shortly, but I'm just going to hand it over to Ollie quickly, as I mentioned, and he's going to give a brief overview of why it's important to measure and report our carbon footprint, by giving a quick overview of Digital Detox's footprint, and I think that's probably enough from me. So Ollie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Kendal. So I thought I would start by just giving everyone a brief overview of Digital Detox and their carbon footprinting journey. So 2019 was Digital Detox's second year of carbon certification. For those of you who don't know, we review the Planet Mark holders' carbon footprint on a 12-monthly certification cycle, and their 2019 footprint related to their calendar year. So Digital Detox is a small startup based in Brixton, and in line with what you would expect from a small business's carbon footprint, the majority of their emissions are from their building use. So 42% from electricity, 40% from gas, and there's also a significant amount of business travel there too. So thank you. Next slide, please, Kendal. So as I mentioned earlier, this is Digital Detox's second year of carbon footprinting. All Planet Mark holders are required to achieve a 5% year-on-year reduction from the second year of their certification. This can either be in absolute terms or on relative terms. So Digital Detox passed their second year certification with flying colours, with a 16.8% relative reduction on a full-time employee equivalent basis. And you can see from the graph on the right-hand side that that's a strong performance. 15 to 20% relative reduction was achieved by just over 12% of our employee holders. So how did they manage to achieve that reduction? Well, a lot of it came from reduction of emissions from electricity, which is to do with greening of the national grid. As more renewables become part of the national grid, the average emission factor comes down. We always encourage our clients to go beyond that if they can. And if clients do purchase renewable electricity from suppliers, then we are able to account for that within their carbon footprints. And I'm delighted to say that from July this year, Digital Detox, my understanding at least, is that they will be procuring renewable electricity, which is fantastic. Digital Detox has also managed to, well, while they have increased their business travel, they've managed to do so sustainably, and the majority of that increase has come from an increase in rail travel, a low carbon form of transport. We always encourage clients to consider rail wherever possible, and also reduced paper usage. For those clients, potentially in the legal sector, may not be able to reduce their paper usage so much, we tend to encourage them to switch to recycled paper, I should say. Slightly more expensive, but a much lower carbon footprint there over its life cycle. So Digital Detox still have opportunities for improvements. They potentially compost their coffee waste. They do separate their waste into recycling and non-recycling, which is very good, but some of that waste still goes to landfill. Also, always potential for improvement on business travel. It's a long-term issue. There are lots of behavioural changes that we can support clients with, but it's a long-term challenge, and also reduction in paper. Next slide, please, Kendal. So, bit of a nitty-gritty slide here, but this is their carbon footprint for January to December. I'll just brush over this, but pull out some key points. First of all, well, why is it important to measure and report on your carbon footprint on an annual basis? Well, as we work towards a low carbon economy, companies are increasingly setting complex targets and long-term targets, and it's important to measure progress against those regularly. And at the Planet Mark, we think it's important that clients do that at least annually. So, and also, next point is that here at the Planet Mark, we are constantly trying to improve our carbon footprinting processes. So in 2019, for example, we incorporated transmission and distribution losses into our clients' carbon footprints, and that relates to the emissions lost in electricity, which is lost between where it's generated at the power plants and where it's used at our clients' sites and offices. Thought I'd pull out waste here. As you can see, the emission factor for waste is nearly 20 times higher than the emission factor for recycled waste. So very important that clients try to recycle as much as possible. If they can't recycle, to send the remainder of waste to energy from recovery incineration. Avoid landfill wherever possible. And lastly, business travel, you can see here that the emission factor for rail is several times lower than air. Wherever possible, try to reduce your air emissions and your air travel. Thank you, Kendal. I think we're moving on to the next slide, please. Excellent. So just to finish off with, another key reason to measure and monitor your carbon footprint every year is so that you can get recognition for your achievements, and you can share those achievements and that recognition both internally and externally. So I thought I'd pause there as before we move on to the meat of the webinar. But just before we do that, I thought I'd take the opportunity to ask Liam a few questions and get his insight as a client. So thanks, Liam. I think I'll start off by asking the broad question, why did Digital Detox decide to measure and report its carbon footprint?
Thanks, Ollie, and also thanks for putting together that data. That's the first time I've seen that. I know you worked hard over the last couple of days to pull that together for today, so thanks very much for that. So I think as a company and as an individual, Digital Detox and myself, we're very much aware of climate change and the challenge it's bringing to us all today. We all have a part to play. And I think Digital Detox, we're quite an inquisitive bunch. We quite like to understand, as a technology-focused company, we quite like to understand how things work. And when we saw the headlines and we saw the decade of action, we wanted to find out what our impact is and how we can play a part. So we took the decision last year to explore our footprint. We realised that we need to become aware what our contribution is to the global crisis and then to manage and reduce it accordingly. As I mentioned before, we're a people-first organisation, and I might, for instance, like hold the keys to the company, but we're always looking to bounce ideas off the team and get them involved in important strategic decisions about where we're heading. So when we decided as a team to go down this route, it was the team who kind of found the planet mark and decided to go with you guys in terms of measuring our carbon footprint. Because they really wanted to be aware of find out what our impact on the environment was. And for me, I think your carbon footprint is fast becoming, or should be fast becoming, a business KPI. So you should be, we want to be in a position where we're measuring it ideally on a monthly basis, maybe more frequently that, reporting that back into the business, and then being able to make decisions based on that information, like with any other type of KPI you might have as a business. So I think the impact of a business is really important. Companies who have a future, according to Mark Carney, are going to be companies who are addressing their impact on the environment, they're aware of it, and they're trying to reduce it. So that's why I think it's important. That's why we decided to kick it off.
Brilliant, thank you, Liam. And my next question actually was going to be, what value do you see from reviewing your carbon footprint on an annual basis? But it seems like you've almost answered that. Is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think the decade of action, some of the, to be honest, some of the work done by Extinction Rebellion last year, I actually ended up in Glastonbury last year as well, and it kind of all hit home as we don't have a huge amount of time left. So it's not a one-off exercise. We need to do it on an ongoing basis. And ideally, like I said, I'd like to do it on a monthly basis, and we're working internally on how we might be able to do that. So you need to have accurate and up-to-date data so that you know you've got a feedback loop, shall we say. So once you make a change, you can understand the impact, and you can then and tweak your business accordingly.
Right, yes. Well, I would wholeheartedly agree on the importance of accurate data. That's fantastic to hear, thank you. And lastly from me, on a sort of a contemporary note, what impact do you think that the lockdown has had on your carbon footprint as a business?
Well, I think because we are digital, we are very fortunate insofar we were able to, as soon as the lockdown happened, we were able to move to a fully remote operating model. I know that's not the case for all organisations, but we were already set up for it, so we were able to do that. And it hasn't had too much an impact on operations. But about 4 weeks ago, we asked ourselves the question, exactly that question. So we did a little bit of a back of envelope calculation. So I took the Planet Marks assessment from last year, from 2018, and made some assumptions and reductions to our carbon footprint based on our new normal, as people are calling it, which is everybody working from remote. So I reassessed our travel, procurement, water, waste, and building emissions, but also factored in the home energy increase because of all the conference calls that people are on and so forth. So I estimated that we had about a 51% saving in CO2 emissions from moving to a fully remote model, which was very interesting because that gave us an additional insight into remote working and will help us make a strategic decision about what we do as a business and what our operating model is as we go back to being able to get back to our office. I think just one quick small disclaimer, we are looking to increase the boundary of our footprint this year and factor in some additional purchases and also commuting, but we don't do that at this point in time, but it's definitely in our roadmap and something we'd like to do moving forward.
Yes, oh fantastic, that certainly sounds like something we could support you with. That's great and fantastic how you've looked at this the issue as it's played out, so thank you. So on that note, I think the plan is to pass back over to you, Liam, and to begin the discussion on what is digital's hidden carbon footprint and where does it come from? So thanks very much.
Great. Just give me a second. Fantastic. So you should be able to see a blue slide right now saying invisible emitter, but please shout if you can't. Okay, so we're going to spend 15 minutes now talking about digital carbon footprint, what it is and how to reduce it. If you are dialed in and listening, we will make a copy of these slides available at the end. They do have the references for the data that's behind some of these stats and figures. So you will be able to have a look at that and maybe read into this in a bit more detail if you want to. So digital, why digital? Well, digital is such an important part of our lives. It's something we can all relate to. But its carbon footprint is huge, and it's only going to get bigger as digital starts to play a more increasingly important role in our lives. So today, in the next 15 minutes, is all about just understanding what is the digital carbon footprint, and hopefully giving everyone the awareness and mindset to take into few decisions about what you do with your digital choices. So we are Digital Detox. We work in digital. We have a large reach into our clients. We are on this journey, and we wanted to share with you what we've learned so far. So it's often called the invisible emitter. I think this quote from Mike Berners-Lee captures it really well. So Mike said, when you are typing, your computer or your phone is using electricity. When you press send, it goes through the network, and it takes electricity to run the network. And it's going to end up being stored on a cloud somewhere, and those data centers use a lot of electricity. We don't think about it because we can't see the smoke coming out of our computers, but the carbon footprint of IT is huge and growing. And I think Mike Berners-Lee said this a couple of years ago. I think it just best illustrates the digital carbon footprint and the challenges we face. So there are some headlines that might have caught your attention over the last couple of years. There's all technology, from the basic email all the way through to artificial intelligence, has a footprint. There's energy being used to power this technology. And these energies have caught our attention and hopefully grab yours as well, to create that awareness that I talked about earlier. So in terms of the size of the problem, the internet is often compared to the aviation industry. So the internet is currently estimated to produce approximately 1 billion tons of CO2 each year. And aviation in 2019 accounted for 915 million tons of CO2, which is roughly 2% of all human-induced emissions. And to put that into perspective, if the internet was a country, it would be the 6th largest polluter. So the internet and the aviation industry are comparable, although given the recent epidemic and us all remote working and not flying so much, I'm sure the internet footprint is now a lot bigger than the aviation industry. One of our big issues is data. Data in the digital world and digital lifestyles is hoarded when it's not really required. And according to research from Hewlett-Packard, only 6% of the data ever created is actually being used today. So that means 94% is sitting in a cyber landfill, and that just keeps on growing. And then if we factor the digital world and the trends, it's only really going in one way. So by 2025, every connected person will have almost 5,000 digital interactions a day, and that's one every 17 seconds. And the global internet traffic is increasing threefold, or has increased threefold from 2014 to 2018, and is set for another threefold increase 2018 to 2022. So the traffic and the connections is increasing exponentially. And of that traffic, about 70% is accounted for by wireless and mobile, which is important because the footprint of a wireless connection over a wireless network is larger than for if you're connecting via your desktop from home broadband. So whilst digital in the IT industry is a growing concern for climate change, it also has the power to solve these issues. I guess I would say that given I work in the industry. But this article in the World Economic Forum suggests that digital technologies could already help reduce global carbon emissions by up to 15%, or 1/3 of the 50% reduction required by 2030. So it looks at industries such as energy, manufacturing, agriculture, land use, building services, transportation, and traffic management. And it identifies technologies, things like 5G, the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence, new technologies that can take the pace of change to the next level and help cut those global emissions. Okay, so let's just consider email for a moment. Emails on average have a carbon footprint of 4 grams of CO2, or can be as much as 50 grams with a heavy attachment. So if we think about all the unwanted emails we get every day, how many people get replied on an email when they probably don't need to be on that email? And maybe all the unwanted marketing emails you get, which you potentially don't get around to unsubscribing. So all those emails add up. And Over Energy suggested that if every connected Briton, 60 million of us, sent one less thank you email per day, it would save over 16,000 tons of carbon a year, which is the same as 81,000 flights from London to Madrid, which is a really big number. And then if you consider search as well, so an average search is estimated to be 0.2 grams, but it can be up to 7 grams of CO2, which is the same amount of energy to boil a kettle. So there are 63,000 Google searches per second. So if you add all those up, that's nearly 400,000 tons a year of CO2 from Google searches. We would need 500 acres of mature forest just to absorb that amount every year, just for Google searches. So that gives you an indication from an email and a search point of view of where those emissions are coming from. So in terms of searches, if you're not already, I do highly recommend Ecosia for your searches. It's probably not as efficient as Google, but it does a job for the vast majority of us. Great thing about Ecosia is the more searches you do, the more trees it plants. So it's going some way to offsetting some of that carbon we produce from search. This is something we can all take on board today. And in addition, here's a couple other kind of quick tips to take away today. So if you do go to a website frequently, then bookmark it. So you go straight to that website as opposed to typing in the search bar and maybe finding your regularly used websites that way. If you are going to look to consume content, look to download it rather than stream it, especially videos, box sets, maybe even music. Downloading it over Wi-Fi is a lot more energy efficient than doing it over a 3G or 4G connection, and definitely more efficient than streaming. And then video. So video is a big consumer of bandwidth, therefore a consumer of energy. And on a lot of social media, videos autoplay by default. So go into those social media accounts. It's quite easy to do this on LinkedIn and turn off autoplay. So you only play the video when you actually want to watch it. So moving on then, what can we do as businesses to help reduce our digital carbon footprint? So we need to think about the digital services we provide to our clients, and we need to consider sustainability when we design and build our websites with some clear principles in mind. But before we do that, let's just consider those elements highlighted by Mike earlier that contribute to the digital carbon footprint. So when viewing a web page, about 30% of the electricity consumed is consumed by the data center. So that's preparing the data to present it on your site and also storing that data that you need. About 30% is used when sending and retrieving that data over either your mobile network or your fixed line. And roughly 40% of the energy is used when on the actual device. So powering that device so your user can view the data and interact with it. So our focus should probably be split across all these 3 areas when we consider how to reduce our digital carbon footprint. So I'm going to start with the customer and the customer who's checking your site on their device. How much energy are they using when they're looking for what they want on your website? So let's consider their experience for a moment. So ideally, your customer can find your site easily through good search engine optimization. There's lots of best practice out there, lots of companies can help, but good SEO will allow customers to go straight to your site, cut down the search, cut down the amount of clicks they need. And once they're there, you need to have a good structure to your site and a good search function so they can quickly find out what they want and allow them to complete their task. And that should be the focus, getting your customers to your site as quick as possible, giving them what they need, and then allowing them to get on with their day. Dwell time is an interesting KPI because in a sales and marketing or previous sales and marketing kind of generation, I would say, dwell time is considered a KPI to increase because the longer somebody spent on your site, the more chance they would have been making a sale. But I think modern thinking these days is the other way around. You should be aiming to reduce the dwell time. You want your customer to come to your site, get what they need, and then move on. Because if you think about all those digital interactions that we happen every day, you want yours to be as seamless and painless as possible. That will mean your customers will keep coming back to you. And then there's analytics you can put onto your site. So you can check out how many bounce pages, because you just come into your site and then bouncing off without finding what they need. And you can then address those bounce rates and find out why people are bouncing off your site. and then dead ends. So making sure there's no dead end pages on your site, and generally just making our content as succinct and useful as possible. So I think we all know from our own personal experience that a heavy page will take long to load, and we know this is going to be detrimental to user experience. And according to Google, it's the biggest factor when rating or in a user's mobile experience. It's more important than findability, and it's 3 times more important than how visually attractive the site is. So your site needs to load quickly for your customer. If the page load time increases above 5 seconds, and the probability of a user bouncing off increases 90%. So there's a potential financial cost impact to a heavy page, and there's also a detrimental impact to the environment. Heavy pages will consume a lot more energy being transferred to your customers than more a light page. But the good news is these environmental standards are closely linked to performance, and it makes absolutely sense to look at reducing page rate. So 3 things we can do, or 3 areas we can focus on: video, audio, and images. If you have video on your site, you might want to ask yourself, is it really required? Is it necessary? If it is, do I really need all those videos? Can I reduce the number of videos? And if you still have videos on your site, maybe reducing the length of them and then focusing on the right format. And also playing them on demand. So as I mentioned earlier, on social media sites, if you have video play on demand and it's not playing all the time, that's going to vastly decrease the bandwidth required. Audio, if you've got audio on your site, again, play it when it's interacted with, don't play it all the time. It's better to begin the streaming of your audio when the user selects it. And then images plays an important part. How many images do you have on your site? Are you using modern lightweight formats for those videos, for those images? And files and images can be reduced to a small size without real discernible difference. Maybe using CSS for backgrounds, that has a lighter page weight than actual images. And the final point there is lazy load, which is a technique to only load images onto a page when they're actually required. Customers, looking at your customers, they're increasingly demanding sustainable products and services. For example, Ocado have the green van for choosing delivery slots which you can select. Decathlon add environmental rating to its own branded projects. Soon, adding an environmental rating will be expected by the customers, and it may even impact on your Google ranking. And in your data center, where is your data kept, and is it kept in the most efficient manner? So if you have the choice, make sure you're choosing cloud wherever possible. The utilization in cloud is roughly 65% compared to 15% when compared to on-premise solutions. So that basically means on-premise, 85% of your server is being powered for no reason. Using as few servers as possible, obviously that's going to make things more efficiently. Powering those servers efficiently, Ben will talk a little bit more about this shortly. And then in reducing any unnecessary stored data, think about what data you're actually keeping versus what you actually need. And then last but not least, the teams and your teams who are working on these products and services, it's important to promote an internal culture that supports sustainable development. That's all about increasing awareness and knowledge through workshops and training, normalizing through some standards, workflows and expectations, publishing your data on the environmental impact. So the data just now mentioned by Ollie will take forward and publish to our team. Top-down buy-in is important from your senior management team as well, to make sure that everybody can see that the senior management team are taking action and are leading from the front. So if you do want to find out a little bit more about your organization's digital carbon footprint, over and above those tips, we can help you through what we're calling the Green Report. And this is allowing organizations to understand the improvements that could be made to digital carbon footprinting. And it's very important right now because it also has a cost saving to most organizations, which is kind of important in this day and age. So it covers 4 areas. So first of all, we'll be looking at your customer and their experience of using their products and services, trying to make that as streamlined as possible and giving them some green alternatives. Then we'll be looking at the infrastructure, hosting and data centers, so analyzing your cloud architecture for efficiency and savings. Then there's your website, your application, and the code that is used to build your products and services, making sure that's as lightweight as possible. And then finally, your team. How much awareness do they have on how their day-to-day activities impact on the company's footprint? So training, workshops, and engagement are key here. And we recently completed one of the green reports for a fairly global technology company and focused on a technology department within that company here in the UK. They had a really good idea of their scope 1 and 2 emissions at about 2 million tonnes, but they could only estimate their scope 3, which included the footprint of their suppliers and their customers using their product and services. And with their scope 3 coming in at 30 million tonnes, this was a big concern, especially as globally they set out an ambitious target for a 50% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2025. So working with one technology department, we were able to identify a potential saving of 79,000 kilograms of carbon. These savings equated to roughly $1 million of financial savings. And in amongst the 30 recommendations and projects we put forward, 5 were taken forward by our client in this quarter. And this had a big impact on their top-down targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's worth noting with this client as well, they already had a culture that was willing, open and active in this space, and they were very supportive with us in making these recommendations and changing their organisation for their carbon footprint. So that's it, that's my time up. That was a whistle-stop tour. Apologies, it was a bit quick, but if you want to find out more, here my details. I'd love to hear from you if you have suggestions or questions about how we can all tackle our digital carbon footprint. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Ben. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Liam. Great stuff. Kendal, you okay to switch over to the slides? Lovely. Okay, so yeah, what I'm going to do in my session is just to delve a little bit deeper into some actionable steps you can take as a business owner, even if you're not kind of a developer with some techie skills. And one of the things that we offer at Urgio is that once we've kind of moved your website to green hosting and we've done our kind of optimization, there's a green website badge, which you'll see just down the bottom right of that slide, that we can award you, very similar to the Planet Mark, after we've done that. So you only see that on that opening slide. So I just wanted to mention that before we move on. If you just move on to the next slide, Kendal. Lovely. So yeah, I started the company a few years ago just as a very brief introduction, because I was working at a software company and then I did a course, and I got some green hosting kind of bundled into this course as part of it. And I hadn't heard of green hosting or the fact that you could have carbon emissions from the internet before. So that kind of switched on a bit of a light bulb. And I think one of the questions that we had in the Q&A so far was, why are people not talking about this stuff? And I kind of asked myself the same question. And what I've been doing over the last few years since starting my company is to try and spread awareness, not just of the issue, but also what you can actually do as an actionable kind of quick and easy step as a business owner to make your own kind of websites and digital footprints lower. So yeah, I'm going to take you through how to take those steps and how you can use some quick tools to measure your own website and give you a bit more understanding. If you just switch over to the next slide. Thanks, Kendal. If you haven't seen it so far, Greenpeace have had a really interesting campaign over the last probably about 10 years now, and they've been producing this report called Click Clean that looks at all of the kind of main streaming companies. So that's people like Netflix and Spotify and SoundCloud. And as the kind of streaming technology world has taken off over these last few years, obviously it's very easy to just think, oh, just spend the evening kind of streaming stuff from Netflix or streaming music throughout the day from SoundCloud. And all of that is using lots of data in the background. There's a huge engine room that powers the internet. And even though it feels very virtual, there is a tremendous amount of physical infrastructure in the background that's using a whole load of energy. So Greenpeace have been doing a great job to kind of identify the good and the bad within the streaming companies and put lots of pressure on them. And surprisingly, the largest companies, Google, Facebook, have been doing a really good job over the last few years. But some of the others, Netflix and Amazon, are kind of lagging behind. So if you want to learn a bit more about who's good and bad in the whole kind of world of streaming, then check out the Greenpeace Click Clean reports. If you just move on, Kendal. Thanks. So just as a really sort of simplified way of explaining how the internet works, essentially what you've got is a data center, as Liam talks about, that is a big physical building, and I'll show you a picture of one in a minute, that stores a whole load of computer disks in a big kind of warehouse style building. And when you open a website, or you use Netflix, or you use a digital app, basically you're transmitting data between your own device and a server in a big physical data center building somewhere else in the world. And so the transmission of data and storage of data in that physical building is where all of this energy use comes from. And so essentially it's a bit more complicated than that in reality, but that's the basic principle. If you just move on, Kendal. So this is kind of a bird's eye view of a typical data center, and just to give that a sense of scale, I've just circled the car park down at the bottom there, where you can see a load of cars. So these are really, really massive buildings, just full to the brim of computer equipment, basically, and there are loads of these all over the world. So again, when you're watching Netflix, what's actually happening is you're transmitting data from computers that are stored in a building like this, and the issue is that these buildings use a tremendous amounts of energy. If you just move on, Kendal. This is generally kind of what they tend to look like inside. So it's not very interesting, and they're not very interesting to look at from outside either. But they're racks and racks and racks of computer disks, servers, and these all kick out lots of heat, just like your computer under your desk would. And because of that, they need to be air conditioned, and air conditioning uses a whole load of energy as well. And all of these servers are constantly, switched on to make sure that when you want to watch Netflix, it only takes a few moments to load, because we're all very impatient these days. And again, that just gives you a feel for the kind of physical engine room that's actually powering your internet use. If you just switch forward again, Kendal. So the main issue with that is not so much that the internet is bad, because obviously the internet's great and we all love it and get a whole load of value out of it. But the problem is, where does that electricity come from? And as I say, some of the main players, particularly Google, sorry about my toddler in the background, who's a bit noisy. Particularly Google have been leading the field with their procurement of energy and their use of renewables, and they've been kind of fully 100% renewable since 2017. So they're really leading the pack, but lots of others haven't taken that same leadership, and particularly some of the smaller hosting companies, they just kind of sweep this issue under the rug, and you wouldn't really know about it until people like me start to explain it in a bit more detail. So if you just switch forward again. So these are some of the well-known hosting companies. Depending on the type of business you are, you might be more familiar with the ones on the top line. So GoDaddy and HostGator and things are more geared towards kind of small business websites. And the ones down at the bottom are more applicable to large businesses that have loads and loads of servers and a really complicated kind of infrastructure digitally. So normally when you're choosing a hosting provider, you'll tend to look at how much does it cost, have they got good reviews, but none of them really talk about their energy use and where it comes from. So again, that's the thing that I try to help people kind of learn about and understand, that actually there is a difference between these service providers in terms of how green they are. Next slide, please, Kendal. So the easiest way to check your own website is a really cool tool called the Green Web Foundation, and it's the greenwebfoundation.org if you put that into your browser. So you can literally just put your website URL into that, and it'll just give you an instant result saying, are you green or not? And the Green Web Foundation basically is a big directory of all of the green data centers worldwide, and it'll be able to check the address of your website and tell you whether that's in a green data center or not. Next slide, please. So it's not just about the data center though. So there are actually two main bits to this. It's really important that you choose a data center that uses green energy if you're able to. But the other bit is about how much data that uses. And as Liam was talking about, it's important to try and kind of reduce the amount of data that your website is responsible for. And there's some relatively quick and easy ways to do that. Without needing to have loads of fancy technical skills. And a good way to look at how much data your website uses is this free tool called Pingdom, and there's another one called GT Metrics. Again, you can just put your website URL into that and it will tell you, as I've circled in the slide there, how what your page size is in terms of megabytes. So anything more than about kind of 1.5 megabytes is considered fairly large. Next slide, please, Kendal. And there's a really cool tool that kind of builds on the Green Web Foundation checker called websitecarbon.com that's been around for a couple of years. And if you put your website URL into that one, what that does is partly tests whether it's in a green data center or not, i.e. whether it uses renewable energy, but it also tests how heavy your page weight is and then calculates a score relative to other websites. So we've got a pretty good score. And if you put yours into that tool, you'll find out if yours is good or bad. And again, it will give you that results from the Green Web Foundation. Next slide, please. So it's kind of a win-win. If you reduce your page weight, as Liam says, just to kind of echo that, it's good all round because it makes your pages load faster. That's good for SEO, makes your visitors happier. And if you're using fancy hosting, it'll tend to reduce the cost of that as well. Next slide, please. So yeah, basically, if you want to find out more, obviously it's been a bit of a kind of whistle-stop intro to the whole topic. On our sites, we offer a free report that kind of builds on that website Carbon one. So we'll kind of recap the scores from that, but we'll also give you a free kind of audit across a range of different points to do with kind of design and what we think of its marketing and its security and things. And if you'd like to work with us, then we can very easily just switch your website over to renewable energy. It's particularly easy if it's a small business website. We can literally just do it, overnight. There's nothing technical you need to do. And we'll also reduce its page weights using some fancy software and techniques and give you a nice badge. We also work with Eden Reforestation Projects, and we'll plant trees on your behalf every month. We do that for every client. Yeah, there's no kind of lock-in, free refunds if you're not happy over after the first 60 days. So yeah, check out our website if you're interested in learning a bit more about that, and we'd be delighted to hear from you. Okay, I hope that's been helpful, and I think I'll hand back to Kendal.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben and Liam, for giving us a quick overview of kind of where the hidden carbon in our digital footprint comes from and some of the things we can do about it. Really interesting. We've also had loads of questions come through, so thank you everyone for putting your questions in the Q&A. We've had lots of upvotes on some of them. So one that's come up and is kind of creeping towards the top of the list from Julie. Julie says, we're increasingly reliant on technology for everything we do. How does it stack up against non-digital carbon footprint? For example, traveling to a meeting instead of doing it on Zoom, or running a full office instead of working remotely part-time and using Teams, for example.
I'll tackle that one first if you like, just a really quick answer. I think the thing about the kind of digital emissions is that individually they're actually very small. So if you think about the footprint from you taking a flight, obviously that's pretty large just in itself for one person. Whereas the digital footprint that you have from having a Zoom meeting is a fraction of that. The reason that the overall kind of ICT industry has a footprint that's kind of equivalent roughly to aviation, it's just that there's so much of it. So individually it's all pretty small, and I think if you were to compare, again going back to Digital Detox's report from Ollie earlier, your own business's footprint from your digital stuff compared to actually, traveling and things, it's way smaller. So that's my kind of take on it.
Thank you. Liam, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that I did a lot of thinking and researching on this during the epidemic just to try and work it out. And yeah, 3 other organisations I know have done something similar to us, and they all came in around about 40%. So the difference between an on-premise in the office 5 days a week model to remote working was around about 40 to 50% reduction. So yeah, I think if based on that information, we're going to move to a remote first operation, which means that everybody will work remotely, but we'll have our office in London as a collaborative space. So 1 day a week, 2 days a week, people will go to the office, they'll work together as a team, we'll be there for client meetings, that kind of thing. But then the normal operating model will be remote working based on that information, because an hour on a video conference with 5 people in different parts of the country is so much more efficient than everybody traveling and attending. We already knew that, but it's just to reinforce that for our operating model.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so from no name, anonymous attendee, but lots of votes on this one as well. If I was to do one thing today for my business, what's the one thing I can do to reduce my digital carbon footprint?
So for me, we're always looking at these types of things from the customer perspective. So I don't know who the question come from or who the customers are, but I would be considering the experience of your customers and reducing that down in terms of the page weight or the UX or the experience when they come onto your website. I would probably start with some sort of UX assessment of your site and trying to cut down the amount of time your customers spend on your site and also the page weight for when they're accessing your site. Most of our conversations start with what's your customer experience like? Because then once you've done that and you increase your customers exponentially, that's going to give you the greatest saving.
Thanks. Liam.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I guess now that you know how to test your website, I would test it, and then the easiest thing that you can do to actually not just test it, but then actually take action on that is again, it's easiest if you're a small business website and you haven't got a really complicated setup with AWS and Google Cloud. But if you're a normal business website and you've got a hosting account with GoDaddy or HostGator or whatever, then it genuinely is really simple to just switch that over to a green hosting provider. It doesn't need to be us; that we're not the only people that are doing it. But we think we're really good at it and we're very competitive. But it's super easy. All you need to do is just give your choice of new hosting provider your details for your website to get into it, and then they'll be able to switch it over and do all the legwork for you. And so it's really simple. Reducing your page weight is a little bit more involved. Most hosting providers don't do that for you. We do because we focus on reducing your emissions as well as just putting it into a green data center. So we'll do all of that page weight optimization for you as part of it. So yeah, that's sort of more than one, but it's kind of the same thing.
Thanks, Ben. And I think we've touched on this already, but a question from Linda. Why do you think for most people, the hidden carbon in your digital footprint is only just starting to be talked about?
Good question. I think it's been talked about for some time. Yeah, I mean, some of the articles I referenced went back, 3-4 years. So I think it's been talked about, but I think it's in the public conscious right now because climate change is very much in the public's consciousness right now. And the other thing, which is maybe a little bit more of my personal opinion, is the big players in digital their focus is getting people online. They're trying to, not entice, but they're trying to keep people online and involved in digital experiences by things like infinite scrolling and those kind of things. And I think sometimes the digital carbon footprint of those kind of practices is kind of swept under the carpet by some of the big tech giants. So yeah, I think it's a combination of the climate change is very much in the public consciousness, and I think some of the big tech companies, I mean, for instance, Amazon is still not really declaring its carbon footprint for its AWS services yet, which they should be. So I think the big players are maybe just haven't embraced it as much as they should have done yet, but I do think they will do soon.
The only thing I would add to that, obviously I'm not a digital expert, but from a traditional carbon footprinting perspective, companies have tended to try to manage and reduce carbon emissions from emission sources that are within their operational control. Traditionally, how that's been done, and digital has been seen as something that's been managed by other people, and therefore it's something that people are coming to later as they try to think more holistically about their carbon footprints. Potentially procuring renewable electricity yourself, your offices, to reduce your digital carbon footprint that way, or choosing to have your information hosted on a server which uses renewable electricity is another thing which companies can do relatively easy. But as I've said, it's something which is sort of outside of a business's, perceived at least, as being outside a business's operational control. And that's why it's something which people have come to later in their journey.
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, it's a really good point. Okay, I'm aware that we're running out of time. Just to pick up on a few very quick questions. So Claire, on your question about references, we'll follow up in our email on that and make sure that gets answered. So we'll share the references for our facts there. One final question that has lots of votes. Is there a standardized methodology for measuring the digital aspects of a carbon footprint? For example, like the ones that we would use to measure carbon emissions, such as gas, electricity, travel modes, etc.
Not that I'm aware of, which is standard. So there are standards for accessibility and usability that have been written by the W3C, but there's nothing that I believe at the moment for carbon footprinting, because there needs to be a framework for how we measure these things and be able to give us thoughts. So some of the tools that Ben has mentioned have got those kind of their own kind of inbuilt measurements, but they are built based on those organisations' standards, and we probably do need to move something that's a little bit more global, so we can all be measured on the same standard.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, the website carbon.com tool is very new. It's been around for a year or two, and that is the best thing that's on the market. They've won they've sort of been shortlisted for a couple of awards over the last year or two. So it has been really pioneering and is really leading the charge on that. As Ollie said, because this stuff is typically seen as Scope 3 emissions rather than being within your direct control, it is tricky. And I've tried to have some conversations with kind of larger businesses about taking that into account, that if you have a huge AWS usage to power all of your kind of operational stuff, that really should be something that you're taking into account if you consider yourself a sustainable business. You could use Google Cloud, that has an incredibly green and the most efficient infrastructure available, or you could use AWS, and a lot of the time people choose AWS because it's just been around longer, people are more familiar with it. But there is quite a difference in the transparency and the kind of planet friendliness of those two providers. But yeah, until it's kind of reclassified from Scope 3, it does kind of make it tricky for people to really focus on how they can get proper standards for measuring it.
Thanks, Ben. I'm aware that there's a lot of knowledge here and a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm really sorry to cut people off and cut off Q&A, because it's always really great to get your questions in. So we'll try and pick those up in the follow-up email and get those answered for you. Just to wrap up in the final 1 minute, because I know everyone will have a hard stop, but just to wrap up on some of the ideas. So for me personally, lots of things have been brought to light, and I think for lots of us, just the realization that there is so much hidden carbon in our digital footprints. Like, I for one will change how I use Spotify and Netflix, but there's individual behavioural things we can do, and there are also structural site infrastructure things we can do. And I think we've heard a lot about those for both of you today, so thank you. In terms of keeping the conversation going and next steps, we will share the slide deck afterwards. We'll follow up on any unanswered questions, as I mentioned, as well as sharing the recording. Please share our Twitter post at the Planet Mark. If you have any further questions, you can contact us on this email address. The lovely Ashley will get back to you, and just our website for your reference. Just a final massive thank you from us at the Planet Mark to all our speakers, Liam, Ben and Ollie, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing everyone who joined today at the next webinar in 2 weeks' time, so keep your eyes peeled for details of that. Oops, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks very much for joining as usual, and hopefully we will talk again soon.